Welcome to Conversations. This is your host, Michael Stone, and I'm excited about the person and the book I'm reviewing today. Henry Grayson, PhD, has been lecturing, teaching, and providing professional training for more than 30 years. He's the founder of the National Institute for Psychotherapies, co-chairman of the PTSD division of the Stand for the Troops Foundation, and author of Mindful Loving and the book we're going to talk about today, Your Power to Heal, Resolving Psychological Barriers to Your Physical Health. Henry, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I love this book. As I told you offline, I'm making it the book of the month for the Well of Light. So I think I underlined every single page at least. I'm interested to start with what called you to write this amazing book?
Well, I think it started out of my personal experience, which I do write a little bit about that in the beginning of the book, because through most of my teenage years and halfway through my 20s, I used to have horrible sore throats and colds, 3 or 4 times a year. And I was in graduate school in Massachusetts, and had a German Shepherd dog that was growing bigger, and he was getting out of the fence, so I had to go out and repair the fence. But it was a horrible winter day. Wind was blowing 20, 25 miles an hour. It was like almost zero temperature, snowing like crazy. And I was out having to do this work on the fence for my dog, so he wouldn't get it loose and get killed in a highway nearby. So I started to get a sore throat. And I said to myself, in my worst possible English, oh, damn, can't. And why? Because I was supposed to take comprehensive exams in a couple of days. And I'd been giving up my weekends, preparing for them for several months, and I was just looking forward to being free of it. And instead, I started to get a sore throat. And I thought, boy, that's the last thing I need. I won't be able to think as clearly for my exams. And I was really upset about it. And then I had a thought, which was very unusual for me, and something that happened. I don't even know how it happened now, because back in those days, there was not much research done on the mind-body connection. There was just a few things, asthma, skin disorders, and a few things were about it. And but I talked to a professor for some reason into doing a directed study on that research and wrote a paper on it. And I'm not sure why, but I'm so glad I did, because there at that moment, I thought, well, I was about to be upset about the cold, but I thought maybe it comes from some other source. Why might I need this? What would it get from me? What would it get me out of doing? Then I thought, well, maybe get me out of taking the exams. And I thought, no, I don't want that, because I've been giving up weekends studying for several months, and I want to go back to play and have time with fun and with friends and family. And so I thought, well, why might it be? And I thought, I don't want it to get me out of taking the exam. And so I thought a little further, well, what emotion might be expressed in it? And with that, I looked over to my next door neighbor's house, saw her standing in the kitchen window overlooking my yard, and I felt a big pang of guilt. And I thought, whoa, wow, I'm onto something here. What's this about? I've not done anything to feel guilty about. And then I thought, and I realized the first time in my life ever realized I was projecting, and how much all of us human beings are projecting all the time. But I realized it about myself, that I was projecting onto her. I don't know if she even saw me out there, but she was doing her dishes in the kitchen sink. But I projected onto her that she was looking out, seeing me out in that horrible weather, doing this work for my dog, when I'm not yet done what I promised to do for her father that lived with her aged father. I was going to move some furniture for him. And I projected onto her that she was saying, here he is doing that work for his dog when he's not yet done what he said he's going to do for my father. I had no idea whether she was thinking that or not, and I caught that and realized it was my projection. And I thought, gee, is this why I'm getting the symptom? Could this really be it? And so I thought, I don't want to take any chances. I don't want that cold to come. I know I want to do well on that exam. I want to be free up my weekends now to have good downtime. And so I thought, well, how would I prefer to deal with this? Well, I said, well, I know I'm not trying to get out of doing this work for her or for her father. I planned to do it the day after I took exams on Tuesday. I took exams Monday, and I'd be over, and I was going to move the furniture. And I keep my word about stuff. So I don't try to get out of things like that. And so I thought, well, just to confirm it, when I finish the work, I'll go in, pick up the phone, and I'll give her a call and just say, just want you to know I haven't forgotten you. I got comprehensive exams on Monday, and I'll be over on Tuesday as I planned. Want you to know I'll be there. The most amazing thing happened. With about 15 minutes, my sore throat was totally gone. It never developed into a full-blown cold, whereas it always had before. It was totally gone. And I thought, wow, first time in 10 years, this has not developed into a horrible cold. And I was just so grateful for that. That started a whole different way of my seeing the world, to realize that our symptoms are not something that happens to us from the world, but they're something general that is expressing something for me. Mm-hmm. And so I've come to conclude that my symptoms are just a language to be translated. And if I can translate that language of what my body is saying, and then find a more constructive and healthy way of dealing with that issue, I have found that the symptoms just go away. And I've had, but the amazing thing is what I call the ego mind, that voice of deception inside us that always speaks up all the time. It causes us trouble, it makes us feel guilty, it makes us feel shame or afraid or whatever it is, or angry, and wants us to take away our joy and peace and happiness and health. But that voice, always is speaking up. So it probably kept me from never remembering to do that for probably another 10 years, that I could do that about other symptoms. I remember to do it about colds, which is interesting. So I've never had another cold since. It's been decades now. And I've not had another single full-blown sore throat or cold since, because I get the first symptoms, I'll explore it, what it might be saying, get to the answer, come up with it differently, so it never develops into cold. But what did happen, I didn't remember to do it for anything else. And so I started to have serious back problems. They got worse and worse. I did a lot of running in Central Park, and which is not good for the back. I never did any kind of stretching. That was another part of it. And then I realized that, okay, I could ask these questions about that too, my back. Maybe I won't, because the doctors were saying at that point, I had a disc that was so severely degenerated that I probably wouldn't walk again without back surgery. And I knew I didn't want that, because at that time, the surgery wasn't that great. 68% of the time, you were worse off after it. So I wanted to take a chance of being worse off to have the surgery. I thought the last thing I want. Then I suddenly remembered I could ask myself those questions. Why might I need this? What would it get from me? What would it get me out of doing? Is there some emotion being expressed in it? And I've added several more things to it since. So I have a total of 8 or 10 questions to ask myself, because I kept finding more I could ask to help me get the answers. But anyway, I came up with 4 different things I needed to deal with differently that were apparently being expressed in my back problem. And one was a lifestyle change I needed to make. I needed to have some stretching, and so I decided to start doing regular yoga. And I realized too that I needed to have some way of calming myself down or quieting down stress. And I was never a heavy drinker, but if I was really upset about something, I might make myself a scotch on the rocks and drink that. But I preferred something healthier than that. And so I decided to start a regular practice of meditation. And I made a commitment to do that. And then I realized that there were 2 issues with people. Somebody I'd felt betrayed by, somebody else I'd felt abandoned by. I never talked it out with them or expressed my feelings or dealt with it. And I made a commitment that as soon as I could be up and about, to sit down with those people, I would talk with them, let them know how I felt, what my deepest, most vulnerable feelings were, and to share that. Once I made a firm commitment, not just a half-assed commitment, but it was a commitment I knew I would keep. Interesting, my back started to feel better. Within a week, when I could not even walk, I couldn't move a centimeter in bed without feeling like I was being jabbed with an ice pick and shocked with electrodes, I started to get better and better. And within a week, I was back at work. And 2 months later, I was skiing in Colorado on those Rocky Mountains, which I loved.
Henry Grayson, you are indeed a testament to your own work. This book is full of examples like that, and I'm really excited to get into meat of it, how, you say the symptoms are a language. Well, how do we learn the language, and what is the language? I would love it if you could show us how you identify the reasons, the stories, the barriers that are hidden in the unconscious that keep us from dealing with our own personal health issues or creating those health issues, rather than just, constantly we're working with symptoms, we're taking pills, we're,
Right.
giving our power away to the experts. And I love that you didn't do that with the doctor. You said, well, I'm going to see if I can take care of this disc problem myself. And you did, and many other things in your life. So let's get into the meat of it, the how the beliefs and our perception and downloads and the kinds of things you deal with in the book really are available for us to heal if we just pay attention and ask some of the kind of questions and do the work that you do in the book.
Well, I think one of the first things is kind of what you were talking about to begin with, is that what the title of the book is, Your Power to Heal. The publisher picked that title, and I thought, that rings a bell, that says it, and I agreed to use it then. Because I think that's a bottom line piece, because mostly we human beings walk around disowning the two things about ourselves that are most important. We disown the fact that we have the power of creation, and we disown that we have love, and we disown that I'm in charge of my life. We think the power is outside for whatever I get, and so things like sicknesses are happening to me. Well, that's really what our traditional medicine has been based on, is an old worldview of 350 years ago of Isaac Newton. The new science of the last century of quantum physics has a totally different worldview. The old worldview is that the only thing that's real is what you can observe with the five senses and measure it. That's just not so. The new science of quantum physics comes in and is very similar to a lot of ancient wisdom in various traditions throughout the world as well. There's consciousness that rules, not matter. And so when I came to realize that, that's what made these questions that kept emerging, have more sense to me. Because if it's consciousness, let me see what's going on inside me. What's going on in my head? What's going on in my thoughts about these things? What's going on that's been encoded in my body or in my survival brain that could be causing the stress? Because we know back as early as the 1980s, the New England Journal of Medicine published research showing that 80 to 90% of all physical symptoms are stress-related. That's an amazing kind of thing to recognize, but it never permeated mainstream medicine that much because drug companies can't make profits on that. They have it and it creates side effects, which is a nice word for saying, no, it creates one or two or three more illnesses for which they can prescribe more drugs. I remember seeing a documentary a number of years ago about where somebody had caught the CEO of one of the major drug companies speaking to a group of investors. And he was saying with a little smirk on his face almost, my goal is to have every human being on earth taking at least one medication. Not to help people get well or to be happier or to be healthier, but to impress the investors that if they were each on taking at least one medication, well, most people who take one have to take two more for the side effects. And then before you know it, by the time you're 55 or 60, most doctors tell me everybody's taking at least 5 or more medications. And when you get 5 or 10 years older than that, you're taking more. And because each time you take one, you're creating some more illnesses. And so that was the thing that I was seeing. So I thought it was time to do something else. And that's where I thought, let me look at what's going on in my conscious mind. Let me use the body to translate it. Like Candace Pert, a wonderful researcher down at Johns Hopkins, titled an audio series of hers years ago, Your Body is Your Subconscious Mind. And so I thought that's really relevant. Candace's work of calling it that, the body being the subconscious mind, it's speaking. We know that 95% of all of our behaviors are unconscious. That's been established since way, way back, even though Freud recognized that over 100 years ago. And now we know that that's the good news too, because if you're driving a car and you've driven it for 15 years and a car pulls out in front of you, you know exactly what to do to jam on your brakes and to swerve and to miss having an accident. Whereas if you're a new driver, you've just been driving about 3 weeks and you're out on the road and a car pulls out in front of you, before you can figure out what to do, you've already crashed. And so what that tells us, the unconscious mind is proving that. You know, a jazz pianist can sit at the piano, his keyboard, his fingers running up and down the keyboard, playing beautiful music while he's having a full conversation with you. He's playing unconsciously, but he's having a firm conversation in the present with you. But his unconscious mind is making this wonderful music. So that's the good news and the bad news, that 95% of our behaviors are unconscious. But the ones that are the bad news, we want to get to those, translate them, identify them, and see what they're saying. And that's what I decided these various questions would help me do. They would help me access that. So if I could ask myself, is there some overall reason I might need this symptom? Sometimes it even occurs to me immediately, sometimes not. Sometimes I can get an answer immediately, sometimes I have to work at it for a while. Once it took me 2 or 3 years to get to the answer of something. Mostly I get to it much quicker, but the whole idea is to stay committed to searching for the answer, rather than just saying, okay, it's a symptom that's got to be fixed. Like one guy came to see me some years ago who was talking about his various problems, and then he started talking about a physical symptom. And I started to explore it a little bit with him. Oh, no, he says, I don't want to go there. I just want to go to the doctor and have him fix it for me. Well, he was not ready. So you don't force this on somebody who's not ready. It doesn't work.
One of the things I want to, before we go any further, I love some of the things you said. I want to underline. It's consciousness that rules, not matter, number one. But I want to look at stress, because we somehow see stress as something that comes from the outside. I see myself stress as not accepting what is, or trying to have it perfect, or not willing to surrender to the way things are. And I'm wondering, if you say 80 to 90% of all of our illnesses are stress induced, you know, how can we use your work to eliminate stress, as well as get to the symptoms to show us what needs to happen in our lives?
Well, I think you're right on track, because the whole idea is to get to what causes the stress. And that's often something that's going on inside us, in the way we're thinking about something, the way we're interpreting something, because we don't see any objective reality. That's clearly established in the new science of quantum physics. Instead, we give our interpretation to everything I see. In fact, even the Nobel Prize winning physicist, Erwin Schrödinger, said, nothing exists until you observe it. That's an amazing statement for our top level physicists to make. But we all think we're seeing reality all the time. And we don't know that we're making up our interpretation of reality all the time. And we're calling it truth. And that's one thing that keeps us stressed. Because if I'm interpreting a situation as being harmful, or being frightening, or being bad, or whatever it is, I'm going to create stress. And if I keep focusing on it that way, I'm going to make myself get a symptom. And hopefully it's just a small one, not a big one. But I can create big ones too, like I did when I had such a severely degenerated disc that said I wouldn't walk again without back surgery.
I think it's interesting that people often say to me, well, you know, seeing is believing. And it's great that you studied with David Bohm. I'm a big fan of David Bohm. But the opposite, believing is seeing. I'd like to talk about the belief systems and the impact they have on illness, and how we can begin to see that our perceptions are shaped by our beliefs, and our world is much more about our beliefs. And then you talk about downloads. Can you talk about beliefs and downloads and the actual sources of illness at that level?
Well, we see through eyes of the past, all of us do. And whatever meaning something had for us as a child growing up, you know, is that we see evidence of that, you know, as we go along. And then we just download things that happen to us from our parents too, without even thinking about it. That's the way we learn language. and learn to, if you grew up in a family with 3 languages, you learn 3 easily. But if you try to learn a 3rd language when you're 16 years old, you got to work your butt off to get to learn it. We soak that up. In fact, there's a wonderful story I read a couple of years ago that just makes it so real for us. There was a German Shepherd dog that was pregnant and was running across the road. Did I put that in the book?
You did, and I love it, Henry. It's a great story.
I think it says it. I share it with people all the time. But she was running across the road. She got hit by a car, but fortunately was running fast enough that it broke her hind legs only, and she survived. And the puppy survived. And she gave birth to the puppies a few weeks later, and they were all healthy. And their legs were all healthy. But guess how they learned to walk? Yeah. They dragged their hind legs behind them, even though they were totally healthy, pulling themselves with their front paws. And I like that story because it tells us what we all did. We all learned to just download what was there. And so if we had parents that were stressed out over things, we had parents that were critical, we had parents that were frightened about things all the time, and all that sort of thing, we're just going to download it. We download it just like you download a program in the computer. And then that causes a lot of our stress. Our belief systems come out of not only what we downloaded from our parents and people around, but our conclusions that we drew from things too. Because we drew a conclusion about this happened or this person did this. And I might draw a conclusion, yeah, that could happen again, better watch out. Or we have traumas that are encoded, in our survival brain. Mm-hmm. Well, those are always easily activated. In fact, one neuroscientist told me that part of our brain is 15 to 18 times more active than it needs to be for our stage of evolution. That says something in itself, to how that we need to clear out effects of past painful experiences, because that part of our brain is going to be so overactive. It's going to start pouring out cortisol and adrenaline like crazy when it's totally unnecessary. And we don't know why we're so stressed, but some ancient kind of encoding of information and conclusion we had causes that part of the brain that's overactive to do that. Mm-hmm. And so we need to use tools for getting to what that's about. And so that's why I come up with, as I say, even more questions now that I ask myself when I get any symptom. The overarching question is, why might I need it? But then would it get something for me? Would it get me love and attention? Like one guy I know who became very crippled from multiple sclerosis. And he wanted to work on that with me, which we did. We discovered that when he was a child, his father would come home from work, who happened to be a physician, but the kids were all frightened when he'd come in, because if they left any toys around or objects around in the house, he'd be on their case just giving them hell, for leaving stuff around. So they'd hear the car go in the driveway, they'd all go into panic and anxiety, and they'd scurry around trying to do it. But the one thing he shared with me was that when he was sick, his father would just be so loving and so caring. He came to see that's the one way he had learned that he could get love and attention, was to be sick. That's why he developed MS, because you had to have loving care. You had to have caretakers around ongoingly, not just occasionally, but ongoingly. After he began to deal with that and to find other ways, he found he could begin to be more agile. He found he could be stronger. He found he could take care of more things himself. And he had less and less need for the symptom. So why might I need it? Can be a lot of different things. It might be I have a belief system. It might be is like in one family I think about, they had a belief system that if one person brought home the strep throat or whatever, or a cold, everybody in the family had to get it. And they believed it so strongly that everyone would always get it. One of the 2 children or one of the adults would bring it home, everybody else always got it. Well, one day the mother had asked me if I'd like to have a few sessions with her daughter, and it was about 10-year-old daughter. And I said, fine, I'd be glad to talk with her. We had a couple of sessions that were really connecting. She came in the next week just crying. And I thought, what's bothering you? She says, I'm starting to get that strep throat. my dad brought it home from work. We always have to get it. The Girl Scout camp is coming up this weekend. I've been wanting to go. All my friends are going to be there, and now I won't be able to go because I'm going to get sick with that strep throat. And she really had believed that. And so I really put myself out in a limb. And I was kind of frightened after that I'd done it. She started to leave. I said, "You've told me that you really want to go to that camp this weekend." "Oh, yes, yes. There's no reason at all that you not want to go?" "No, all my friends are going. We just love those times together." And so there's no reason. I got clarification, not get an excuse, get out of going. So she started to leave. And I said, "Well, you know, you don't have to get that strep throat if you really wanted to go to the camp." She said, "What? Is that really so?" And I said, "Yes, it is true." And she left, and she was kind of amazed as she walked out and left. I felt afterward, oh my God, did that say something that's going to really make her mother think that I'm the horrible creature in the world, you know, telling us to her daughter, you know, and that's been the family belief system for years. But somehow I managed to live through it. And the next week, the girl came in, and she said, "I can't really believe this. I can't really believe this. I started to believe that I could go and I didn't have to get it, and I'm feeling better already." She said, "Is that really so? Can I really do it?" I said, "If you really want it, you can have it. If you really want to go to that." And she was so happy as she went out of the room. And the next week, she came back having been to camp and was just a joyous thing.
Wonderful.
Well, the interesting thing happened. That changed the whole family. Because a few weeks later, the mother came in saying she was starting to get the strep throat. Her son had brought it home from school. And she said, "Could I do what my daughter did?" And so she got what it was about and didn't come in. Finally, the whole family started being healthier. So they had a belief system that they had to catch it, you know, from another person. So if I have a belief, the system that's at work, you know, that can create an illness for me.
Yeah.
And
so let's talk about changing beliefs. One of the things I just want to note is what you said about not getting the love that the person needed. And I think that's so true for so many of us that, you know, when we're young and we need to get love and nurturing, and then we find ways like getting sick or other ways that psychologically sick also. And so, you know, you've shown a lot of different ways in your book to do belief change work. And I think that's at the heart of it. And some of them are very simple, like the thymus rub. I think that's a wonderful, I find myself as I'm reading the book doing that, you know, but there's so many powerful, your book, I made a list of, there must be at least 30 different exercises, some of them quite involved and others quite simple in your book. I'd love for you to talk about belief change, because one of the beliefs that many of us have is we can't change our beliefs.
Well, I think that I found that tools that involve some use of the body too help us focus a little bit more than just trying to do it in my head alone. Because what happens is that ego mind voice in our heads wants to jump in constantly to counter it all the time, all over the place. And so it can kind of take over and dominate more easily. And so if I'm doing something physically, like you mentioned, the thymus heart rub, where I'm rubbing the upper chest in a clockwise fashion, very soothingly with a flat hand on the chest, but saying I deeply love and accept myself, even though I don't think I deserve to be free of the symptom, or even though I don't think it's safe to be free of it, whatever it is.
Even though are the beliefs, you're saying, even though I have this belief, right?
I'm still loving and accepting myself.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still loving myself. Well, that helps bring it into focus for a person a little bit more with acceptance rather than a self-judgment. But I find this is also a useful preparation for doing deeper clearings of traumas, painful experiences, negative belief systems that we've carried, that maybe the whole world carries around us. It might be a belief, or it might be just a belief I concluded myself. And from something that happened to me, like One guy up in Connecticut where I live, his house was broken into about 6 years ago. He tells me that now every time he drives up to his house, he's looking around to see if there's a prowler around, even though there's been no other invasion since. And even though there was never a major disruption from the person breaking in, they just stole one item or a little TV and that was it. But he still reacts to it. That's the way that overactive brain works. And then out of that trauma came a belief. Well, I've got to watch out, somebody could have gotten broken into my house again. I live near the parkway, they could get to it easily, and so I better watch out for it. And so we carry those kind of beliefs, all the time. Or I'm not good enough. Or it might be a belief that I wouldn't be safe doing this, or people won't like me, or I'm not lovable, or I can't express myself, or I'm not worthy.
We not only carry them, they're our identity, they're our ego, our narrative that makes up who we are. So, the big question is, how do you bring more awareness to these unconscious beliefs, hidden messages, and trauma-related illnesses? The first question, of course, is how do you discover that you have them? Because it's kind of like looking, you can't see your own face. You look at the mirror, you see the beliefs, then, okay, now I see the beliefs. How do I then begin to reprogram my subconscious mind?
Well, one thing is, as you've noticed in the book, I have a list of possible beliefs that common ones that people carry, or I have a list of traumas that people carry, several pages of them. And it's just if people just go through there and just quickly check anything that seems to apply at all. That starts to open up the door to looking at seeing, well, what kind of stuff am I carrying? And then if I can begin to assess it, how strong is that? I have this belief that I'll be rejected. Or people rejected me when I was a teenager. They'll be rejecting me at work now. Or a girl, if I'm not interested in her, she'll be rejecting me. Okay, how strongly do I think I believe that? And that's one thing to assess on a 10-point scale. Because if it's influencing my life very much, it's got to be fairly strong. It's got to be an 8, 9, or 10. If it's influencing my life, that's the key. Whether the ego mind wants me to think it's only a 2, so I'll ignore it. But if it's affecting my life, that's the key part. If it's affecting my life and I'm living by that belief and it's causing me a lot of stress. And then I find that there are a couple of different procedures that have emerged over the last couple of decades.
Let me just interrupt a second.
Okay.
Because one of the things you do, you say on a scale of 1 to 10, but one of the things you do is muscle testing. A lot of people don't know what that kind of testing is. Can you share about it? And also, a lot of people don't realize that you can do your own muscle testing. There are many ways to do that. Perhaps you can just say how you get those, that scale of, oh, this is a 5, this is an 8.
Well, there are various ways that one can do the testing. I find the most reliable is if someone who's experienced in doing it can do it on you, and you join your consciousness, and it's more likely to be accurate. But I can do it on myself, but sometimes I can deceive myself doing it on myself. There's a line from one psycho-spiritual work called A Course in Miracles that says it beautifully. When 2 minds are joined together in the search for truth, the ego mind can't prevail. And I like that one because that takes me to the most accurate part.
Yeah, and you have so many ways of going all the way back to the possibility of past lives, in utero trauma, the early first 6 years or 7 years where we're kind of a tabula rasa. So these are deeply ingrained, and also familial, ancestral, cultural. All of these beliefs, are in the subconscious, which is, I think, 1,000,000 times more powerful than the neocortex, the conscious mind. So, the odds are against us in some ways.
Well, the thing is, one can do self-testing by simply placing one hand down over the knee. You're sitting down and you place one hand over it and you pick the leg up a couple of inches off the floor and resist pushing down on it. And so if I resist with my leg and push hard with my hand, and I say, my name is Henry, and resist and push. And I say, my name is Joe, resist and push. Well, it goes weaker on Joe because I know I'm not Joe, I'm Henry. You know, that kind of thing. And if I do it with several things that I know to be obviously true and false, that helps me get into the swing of it.
Yes.
I say I'm wearing a blue shirt today. I'm wearing a white shirt today. Whichever one is accurate is going to be stronger, and that kind of thing. Or I'm in New York City today versus I'm in California today. It's going to get strong on my being in New York today because that's where I am today. So if we pick out several obvious things, we begin to trust our muscle testing a little bit more. Then after that, if I can throw in the thing, then the strength of my belief that I will always be rejected is how strong. Okay, I think it's a 7 and do muscle testing. Let's say the strength is a 7, resist and push. It went down. It's greater than a 7. Oh, it got stronger. Okay, it's an 8, resist. It's a 9. No, it went down. So strength of that belief is an 8. That kind of thing. And then you want to do the same thing once you've done one of these clearings on these things too, to make sure, the goal is to make sure we bring it to a 0. Whatever the strength of the trauma or disturbance is, whatever the strength of the download is, whatever the strength of the belief is, that we want to be sure we clear those out, because if we carry them and my subconscious mind keeps expressing them, they're going to keep me getting physical symptoms and emotional symptoms, both. And so I'm going to destroy my health emotionally and physically if I keep these things alive. But I find if I can do these things, I keep down the stress level. If I keep down the stress level, I really keep the illness level down. And so therefore, have far, far fewer symptoms if I do that. And if you keep down the stress, you delay aging too. Doctors tell me that my body age, been telling me for a number of years now, is probably about 25 years younger than my chronological age. And I'm always happy to hear that. And that's the main reason I'll go to a doctor, is I want to go just to have proof of how healthy I am.
Verification,
Not to go find out what's wrong, but to go to find the other. And so that keeps my mind set in one that keeps me healthier too. So
I think one of the things that's really important that you also say is the importance of going to the body and how our thoughts and our feelings and emotions are affecting the body. The body's kind of the front line, and yet most people, of course, I came out of the corporate world, most people are pretty disembodied. Number one, they're not very in touch with their feelings. Number two, we don't inhabit our body, at least with consciousness. It's kind of, you know, heads on sticks type of thing.
There's something happening to me.
Yeah.
Rather than saying it's something I'm expressing.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we need to, that's where we need to take back our power, because we mostly disown our power to heal. We disown the fact that we are love itself. And the way we have love is by being it.
Yeah.
Like Ralph Waldo Emerson put it beautifully when he says, love and you shall be loved. And what he was just recognizing, we don't go chasing for love, trying to buy it or purchase it or prove it or get somebody to love us. I get love by being love. I'm being that, not every cell in my body knows it. But then I'm attracting it too because I'm being it, not because I'm trying to get it. And so that's the part that we disown so much, is that power and our own inner identity as love itself, and our power to actually affect what's going on in our bodies.
One of the things that, you know, we talked about David Bohm, who I have high regard, and also the whole world of quantum physics and quantum consciousness, which is really an exciting, even though it's been around 100 years, it's starting to enter into our consciousness and our belief systems. And altering the way we see the world. So talk a little bit about the lessons of quantum physics, the inseparability and the, you know, the issues. There's so many: wave collapse, coherence, all these different things in physics, but some of them particularly apply to your work. Can you talk about those?
Well, David Bohm was a major influence in my life. I studied with him. And he changed my whole way of seeing the world.
You're
It was
lucky.
just an amazing experience. And before him, I'd studied with Viktor Frankl, and who taught me very clearly the power of thoughts and how many people in the concentration camp survived because of how they changed their thoughts or had different thoughts from others, or they're befriended by the guards and so on. So both of these people were very major influences in my life that I began to see this is stuff for me to apply to my life and to also help other people, apply these principles to their lives. But David Bohm, of course, in quantum worldview, is that we're all part of one unified field. That's what exists in the universe. It's just one unified field. In fact, Einstein put it very beautifully. He said, it's just an optical illusion that we're separate. That's an amazing statement for somebody like Einstein to make. Just an optical illusion that we're separate.
And it's
But
at the heart of all of our suffering is at the heart of that particular belief of separation, the myth of separation.
all of our emotional and physical suffering comes from this illusion that we're separate. That's the bottom line piece. That's right.
That's big.
And if I can come to recognize the opposite, and I find sometimes I'll walk around just, if I let myself start to drift the other way, if I can walk around and swing my arms and make up some kind of phrase that kind of supports that. I am one with God in the universe. I have limitless power and peace. I am this or that or that, but just some way of making it something I'm reminding myself that that's the most powerful part to stay in my consciousness. Not the other worldview that the power is all outside me and it's all happening to me. But I'm the creator. I'm the one projecting meanings onto everything. I'm the one attracting everything that happens. And if I can recognize that, I can reduce the stress enormously in my life. And if I reduce the stress enormously, I can be much happier. I can have better relationships. I can have better health in my body. I can have more success in my work if I can reduce the stress by getting to all these hidden sources of it. And then I found, as you were asking before, what are some of these kind of tools? There are two major approaches that have emerged over the last couple of decades. One has to do with bilateral brain stimulation, and the other one has to do with stimulating the energy meridians in the body. That's based on the Chinese system of acupuncture, but not using needles, but just touching them, massaging them, or tapping on them, or just holding your fingers on them, that they can stimulate them. Because in that system of thought, an ancient Chinese system of acupuncture, they saw there were energy meridians that ran through the body. We used to think that they made them up, but now we can photograph them, so we know they're actually there. The new technology says that. And each one of these meridians of energy is connected to a different bodily organ. And that bodily organ represents a negative energy and the opposite positive energy. And they found if they can stimulate that meridian, and the way they did it was with needles, that sticking them in and twirling them, that you could reduce the negative emotion and allow the positive to come this place. Well, a psychologist in California back some 30 years ago or more went and studied that and says, we need to do this with our patients, but we can't stick needles in them. He said, I wonder what would happen if we just tap on those spots. And he discovered that it worked. And so he's the one that started the whole process going. His name was Roger Callahan. And he started it going. Now it's emerged and simplified and more generalized before that. But one of the approaches that he used had a combination of the meridian stimulation and the bilateral brain stimulation, doing some movements with the eyes and some humming and counting, which stimulate the two halves of the brain to work together. I discovered by accident how you can actually deactivate a genetic piece of information that way. We used to think that genes were etched in stone. Now the new science of epigenetics says, no, it's consciousness that rules, and genes are activated or deactivated by the environment, and the environment includes consciousness. Well, a couple of years before I read about epigenetics, back in the early 90s, I was with a patient who'd suffered from severe anxiety. And I studied most of the forms of psychotherapy. Traditionally, I'd studied psychoanalysis, but I realized that was very helpful in dealing with the unconscious and the idea. But there are other modalities that are helpful in other ways that help you deal with thoughts better or help you change your behaviors and so on. So I began to study them all and found that there were pieces that were helpful from different ones. So anyway, I tried everything with her, and nothing was working to help her with the anxiety. And I couldn't understand it. Then one day she came in and she says, "Henry, I think I was born with this." I thought, well, that could be. And I thought, let me just do this muscle testing on it. And I said, make that statement. I was born with this problem of anxiety. It was in my genes. Her head arm became very strong. And I said, no, I was not born with it. It came later. Arm just flopped down. I thought, wow, she just taught me something really important here. And I thought, that's before I knew about epigenetics, that we could actually change the gene or deactivate it. I thought, what have I got to lose? Let me just use one of these new tools I learned from Roger Callahan, tap on the spots in the bilateral brain, and just no harmful side effects. Let me see if it works. We did it. We found that there were three different genetic members. We cleared them all. And I was away the next week speaking at a conference and someplace else. I came back the following week. She comes in just glowing all over herself. Just so happy, the biggest smile I've ever seen. She says, first time in my life, I've been free of anxiety. She said, wow, I can't believe it. She deactivated the genes that had sent that information into her from her ancestry. And I was so grateful to her. She taught me something real important. And then about 3 years later, I read about epigenetics, and I said, oh, no wonder. Her consciousness, we used a tool that just simply used consciousness to focus that to deactivate the gene. And so the new science of epigenetics explained it for me.
Yeah. And the epigenetics has really turned the whole genetic thing on its head, recognizing that. Bruce Lipton is, of course, was on recently, and we talked a lot about that on the show. But
he's the first person I learned it from was Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce is amazing. I just love having him on. But one of the things behind that, we often can look at someone and say, oh, they're such a victim about they're saying that because their mother was this way or because they, but really when we begin to explore, it's hard to admit that we all have victim consciousness. And that to explore our own mental functioning and thinking and see, where am I a victim? Oh, because I give my power away here. It has a lot to do with our innate power.
Exactly.
I'm working on a book on power right now, and one of the things that comes up is how we disempower ourselves, just our speaking and going to the experts and saying the doctor knows better than me, or I have to learn this because I'm a victim of this, so I have to learn something, and then we become a victim of the thing we learn. It's hard to accept that, but I think there's a power in recognizing and being attentive to how much these thought patterns, beliefs, behaviors, all the different patterns, that we can change those habits. They're habitual. We can really change them.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking one thing too about relationships, as well as with the body, because that's been a focus of mine too. And I'd seen some years ago that it seemed like when couples would think different things about the other, that they would be eliciting certain responses. And I thought, let me just do a little experiment. My wife and I lived in New York at that time, just down the street from where my office is here now. And I thought, let me do a little experiment secretly and see what happens. For 2 weeks, one day of the week, I'll go out and I'll think only loving thoughts, kind thoughts, grateful thoughts about her. Any negative thoughts come in, I'll just banish them right out, but I'll think these. Now, on the alternate days, I'll do exactly the opposite. I'll think my critical thoughts or my deprived thoughts or my judging thoughts, and any positive ones come up, I'll screen those out. And I'd like to see what happens. It blew my mind what happened.
Yeah.
Because I get home, locks are loud. You have that double lock on the New York apartments, and it would click. On the days I was thinking the positive one, she'd be bounding to the door with a hug and a kiss, or maybe a cold drink in hand, and lead me over to the couch to sit down and share the day together. And on the other days, I'd come in, she'd be nowhere near the door. I'd call out to her, and I hear a grumpy response from the far end of the apartment. I'd find her and we'd start a conversation. Within 5 minutes, we'd be having a spat.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened repeatedly, day after day. Then at the end, I told her about it. She said, "Oh, thank God. I didn't know what was happening to our relationship." But she appreciated the experiment. And so we can laugh about it as you're laughing. And we both learned from it. But
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about somebody else, I'm attracting from them.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And there's so much more we can talk about. Relationships, of course, are a wonderful testing ground and field to break down those places of separation, and all those places in a relationship where there's anxiety or stress or discontent are all huge portals are opening to healing. And unfortunately, we're out of time, Henry.
Oh, that stuff that doesn't even exist.
No, it doesn't exist, but on the radio it does.
I know.
But I want to plug your book, Your Power to Heal, Resolving Psychological Barriers to Your Physical Health. And Henry Grayson, Dr. Henry Grayson, it's just been really a delight to have you on. And as I said, in the Well of Light this month, you will be the book of the month. So there's just so much richness in this book. And what I like about the book is it's a healing manual. And you've done a great job with it, and just so grateful that you could take the time to be with us on Conversations today.
It's been good to be with you, and I've been delighted too, because the whole purpose is to help people with this book. And I noticed on Amazon, I went one day and just clicked to see what the reviews people put on, and I was just so grateful that people were finding it so helpful.
Yeah.
And they were just constantly saying how much they benefited from it. So that's the part that I'm most grateful for.
Thanks, Henry.
So more people can be happier and healthier.
Yes.
Good to be with you.
You too.